Something Came from Baltimore is a free podcast. Today, we are interviewing Zach Brock with his new album called Dirty Minds. Hello, welcome to Something Came from Baltimore. I am your host, Tom Gouker. Something Came from Baltimore is a jazz, blues, and R&B podcast, and it's not really about Baltimore. Today, via Zoom, we are traveling to Brooklyn to chat with the on-again, off-again Snarky Puppy member. He's the violinist Zach Brock. 2021, Zach Brock released an EP called Polyphony and a classical influence recording called Light Shines Through. In this recording, Zach is channeling the 70s fusion of JeanLuc. Dirty Minds has 8 tracks. It has an intro and outro and 6 longer progressive jams. Zach Brock, welcome to Something Came from Baltimore. Do you know who Winger is and do you like them?
I know who Winger is. I bought this t-shirt as a bit of an ironic purchase because they were so over the top. That song 17 in particular is just so egregiously horrible and awesome at the same time. So I used to ride around with it was the first trio I put together, cordless, just bass and drums, and we called ourselves the Magic Number, and we used to drive around and riff on stuff like that and listen. And so I bought this t-shirt as sort of an ironic tip of the hat, but I have to say, their guitar player, I think, is like one of the greatest guitar players of all time. And actually, in listening to more of their music, we came across these ballets that, Kip Winger has been doing, right? Oh, you know more than me.
It's a shock,
So heavy, yeah. And then after that, I was just like, oh yeah, I'm fully endorsing.
He has an awesome Botox regimen or something because he's still pretty as almost a 60-year-old man.
Yeah, he was just too pretty. He was born too pretty.
Yeah, he definitely has a lot of stuff going on. Did you ever see Showgirls, the movie?
Well, that was the thing that was the end of the career of what's her name?
Yeah, the girl from Saved by the Bell.
Nice dress.
Thanks. It's a Versace.
It's Versace.
What?
Versace. It's pronounced Versace.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because Snarky Puppy is just such a crowded field. Do you ever feel like taking up marbles and just throwing them on the ground to see if you can knock some of those people out?
No, I don't. That's funny, though. This last tour, I was out legitimately on tour for 8 weeks at the end of the spring, but then also before that for 2 weeks at the GroundUP Fest. So I was with Snarky, and then I'm adding another week in there because I got COVID. So then I was still away from my family, kind of quarantined. So 11 weeks, which is the longest run of anything I've ever done in my life. I love all of those guys in the band more instead of less, and even after all these years, I started playing with them back in 2007. I think I found the first email exchange that I had between me and Mike was, I think, in 2006, maybe. And so I came down to Dallas and overdubbed some stuff on I don't know if it was their third record, I think, called Bring Us the Bright. It was the second or third. And it was the first one that Bill Lawrence from London played on as well. And I played the solo on his song 34 Klezmer that we still play occasionally. Going all the way back that far, it's been a relatively stable cast of musicians. There were some changes farther back, but definitely in the past, 8 years, it's been really, really solid. And, one of the things that, it would be great to play with them all the time, but there is also the danger of putting all of one's eggs in one basket. Yes. So it's
jazz artists don't do that.
Right.
Jazz artists don't do that. They just don't do that.
Exactly. Especially. And so it's nice. I mean, it sucks when the tour is over, because then it's like, okay, now I'm going to take a big downgrade and, probably pay and, type of venues. But that doesn't make the exchange of energy between the audience any less. And of course, I love playing clubs and small clubs and jazz clubs as well. And I was just going to say that having that kind of almost sports team level roster in a band does give everybody who wants to have a solo project or who had one before they joined the band time to still work on that.
Yeah. I went on your website. You have really reasonable rates for classes. And then you had that, like, I will meet you in person. That freaked me out a little. So it made me think, I'm like, have you ever met someone who was just like a psycho fan who just wanted to hang out with you for an hour?
I've met some kind of potentially psycho folks along the way. Never from that, because, if I had, that would not be up on my site. I think that some of the stuff that's up on my site, honestly, is a coming out of the full pandemic lockdown and just at a certain point, just reaching a certain point of, I guess you could say, financial desperation.
Yeah.
I have to say that after the tour, I had a lot of time to think about things, not running around sort of multitasking like I do in my normal jazz life, and what I'm going to be doing actually moving forward, I still teach occasionally privately, but it's really hard. I'm sure, all musicians out there that are, that might check this out, it's like, it's really hard to make it financially doable, because it's just, it's too hard to, you can't really charge what you need to charge an hour to make a living. So it's either you charge some exorbitant amount of money that no one will ever be able to pay, or you try to have 80 students a week, which is also like, game over for anything else. So what I'm going to be doing is concentrating on releasing a few master classes every year, occasionally opening up a little thing. I mean, I still teach master classes out on the road. That's a classic jazz guy move. And sometimes we do that in Snarky, and any tour that I set of my own stuff, I always try to set up at least one master class at a school, because that always ends up paying like 3 times more than the club or whatever. So I love doing that. But it's going to have to, I'm kind of focusing in on some stuff, because I'm starting to work on the next record and actually a couple of different projects looking out over next year, and realizing how little time I have. Again, suddenly.
You need another pandemic. So
yeah, I know. And hey, I mean, I sure hope it doesn't happen, but we just don't know at this point.
When I listen to this album, Dirty Mindz, it feels like you have such an opportunity to do this live, and you sell the drama.
I think about Jimi Hendrix more than I think about Kip Winger. Just
surprisingly,
because, I've never worn tights, and I'm definitely not that flexible, so I can't do any of the overhead kicks. I could lick my violin, but I don't think that would do much for it or me or anybody else. But yeah, I mean, I think that with the music in Dirty Mindz, and the way I decided to just make the record the way that it was, is I wanted it to kind of be like it would be if you heard it. I mean, obviously I could have truncated things, and a lot.
Yeah. And
I just sort of decided not to. I mean, the album also had just sort of a very strange back burner type thing. It just almost didn't get done like 5 times, and I just kept having to come back to this and just like pull its body over the finish line. But I really love it, just in a way that it's part of my family, and the emotions that I put into this, I felt were very, they were very true. The music was coming from feelings and then into ideas, rather than, okay, I'm going to have this idea where I'm going to do a song that's in 11, and then it's going to have this thing. Like, all these songs had stories to me, and they have, they don't really have secret lyrics, but they all have stories.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff came together going out on long walks and just trying to hear where the song wanted to go, as opposed to sitting down and like banging my head against the piano or like doing 15 million versions of the bridge. I did a little bit of that, of course, obviously, but the other thing that I was thinking about in this record, and I know it came out very far from what it is, but my hero, I have many violin heroes from different types of music and, different eras, but the person that always comes back, I'll go away from him and then I'll come back and I'll get into somebody else for a while and then I'll come back. Mm-hmm. It's JeanLuc for me. Yeah, the thing that's so wild to me about his influence and what he did with the violin in music is that, number one, until I started really reinvestigating his stuff, because I used to just, check his stuff out for licks or whatever, I wasn't really thinking about any artistic thing. In fact, I just wanted to hear, bebop and other stuff. And at the time, I actually didn't even really like the music so much. I liked the violin playing, but I didn't like the music. It wasn't something I was going to put on a lot. Mm-hmm. But I've come, around to that. And one of the things that made a big impact on me was realizing that even all of these other weird early records, which I loved, even the one up to Zappa and, when he came over and was playing with Zappa and George Duke and all that. But from 1970, he put out a record every year from 75 to 81. And 2 years in that, he put out 2 records. Mm-hmm. And the second year that he was on Atlantic, he put out 2 records, and it wasn't like he was doing one and then a live one. It was 2 full studio records. And then he took a break, changed record companies, and then put out a record a year again until like 1990 or 91 or 2 or something like that. So to have that kind of creative output as instrumental music, no lyrics, no nothing, of just like weirdo violin coming out of bebop, going across, whatever you want to call it, jazz rock, prog rock, fusion, and all that stuff. He just kept creating. And so I guess as a result, also, everybody has a different entry point for JeanLuc, and I'm telling this long story just to say that also thinking about the staging of this music on Dirty Minds, I was very much thinking of, the instrumentation and everything. I was very much thinking of JeanLuc's, Atlantic Years band, keyboard with, a bunch of different keys and, maybe even a piano in there, guitar player, bass, drums, and, seeing all the things I could see on YouTube and everything like that of that. I've seen him live, several times too, but not from that era. So I don't know. That's about as far as, I might wear a sparkly shirt is what I'm saying.
I hope you're enjoying the interview today with Zach Brock. Just a couple of notes and we'll get right back into that interview. If you're a Beatle fan, and who is not, right? I am a co-host of a limited edition podcast called The Beatles Come To America with my co-host, the Beatle Guru, Brooke Halpin. We review all the U.S. album releases from the past. That's the Beatles 6, 65, Yesterday and Today, and Hey Jude, and more. Patreon is out, Venmos and Cash App is in. Tips are always welcome here at Something Came From Baltimore. Check out Something Came From Baltimore, the show, and it can be found on thebox.com. It's now 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursdays for the East Coast and 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the West Coast. It's more talk and it's more music. All of this information is available in the show notes. Now, let's get back into the interview with violinist Zach Brock. The album is called Dirty Minds. we're gonna go into the album a little more. When I think of Dirty Minds, I only think of the Prince album song. So the difference between this is just really the Z at the end. I know that I'm older, so I'll always like go, oh, Dirty Mind, that's Prince. Like that is Prince. What I loved about this, other than the song itself, and we're going to play a sample, is the video that you created with this is mind-blowing. And I'll tell you why. One, if you really want to see how things are made, like you're able to see how you guys are actually like working together as a unit. And you're like, oh, that's how they're making that sound. Then you have this awesome like background. It looks like a church or something. Yeah. And then if you're a techie, you know, if you really are into tech gear, there's stuff all over the place. That it's like Candyland. It's all over for you to take a look at.
That's so great to hear. My wife, Erin, who just came up the stairs at the beginning with the coffee, is the person who made that video. She's a filmmaker, and we had all this footage from the sessions, and then we cut in some other stuff for the fun of it. But she's the one who puts that together. One of the many things that I love about working with her and in video and music is that she's a musician. She wouldn't say that she's a musician, but yeah, she plays piano and flute, and she was also a really serious dancer back when we lived in Chicago. But rhythm and the editing it's so key. Yeah. I mean, it like in any music video, the edits have to be with the groove if there's a groove in the song. Otherwise, and it's like the second that I see something that you can tell that somebody put it together because they're like, no, but this is cool because of that, but they're just not listening to the music. So, there's many decisions that she had to make where she wanted to do something else, but she was constrained by the music first. And I felt like, what she created really had that kind of head bumping kind of a thing. I would hope.
Country Church to me is just like a bluesy song when it has a really nice keyboard break in the middle.
That was the first song that I wrote. I wrote that song almost a year before I wrote any of the other songs. And I'd actually even played it with a few of my jazz groups, sort of trying out, some different things. I was moving in this direction where I was wanting to approach this different sound, which to me was like, Ponty, but not just that, but just sort of everything on the American airwaves, from like the early or mid 70s to, the early 80s.
My mind, the last 3 minutes is like the outro of Layla. It has that swirling like jam vibe to it that is like intoxicating. Love it.
Thank you. Thank you. That song, I feel like my eyes well up with tears, not because I think it's great, but because it just came from a strong feeling about my daughters who were identical twins. And the idea of that song was, let's see if I can not cry in the interview, which is basically when Aaron and I became parents, we had ideas about identity, where that comes from. I was very much at the time, up until that time in my life, a nurture versus nature. I was like, oh no, it's just, it's how you raise people. It's it's the family unit. It's the values and how you, demonstrate life. I was all into that. And it wasn't until they were born and I met them that I had to realize that that is all has a big impact, but we also all come into this world with something else that is not imprinted from behavioral observation. I believe this. I mean, I feel like I saw it from the get-go. I mean, from, they were twins, and so they were a little bit premature, so they were in the NICU for a couple of weeks before we had even taken them home, seeing their different personalities and observing that. And then also on top of that, as they're getting older, realizing that I'm just constantly having to figure out, like, meet these new people, because they are who they are. But I think that, I understand how, I know there's no way of protecting myself from the wrath of the teenage years or anything like that. But I do remember that feeling of trying to assert your identity and not maybe having adults basically who saw you as like, well, this is how you are, not realizing how quickly you were changing. So anyway, all of that's kind of going into that song, which is like kind of the most just simple song of the things. But that chorus is all about them. They're singing that chorus in my mind.
But I say it's a multi-listen for people. It's snarky-ish, and it's very jammy, but it's very controlled at the same time. Initially, I was like, wow, this has a Circus du Soleil vibe to it. It has a level of theater attached to it. And I think that maybe when you get older, you need to pitch your ideas to them, because I think you could do a great show as, produced by you. This was like something on the side. It's like, this is my music. You can do your acrobatics, to it.
Whoa, that would be amazing.
Yeah. I see that in your future, because I was like, this has some kind of elements that I can see that you could take over.
That sounds like a good gig,
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's like 20 shows running at the same time.
Yeah.
If you could at least do one show, it keeps on playing every single day for 2 times a day. So it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to recap, the album is called Dirty Minds. It's with a Z, and we're talking to Zach Brock, and it's coming. It was June the 3rd, right?
I can't believe it. Yeah.
It's June the 3rd. Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, we've been talking before that, and we were talking before that. We just never got a chance to connect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got your album the first day. I was like, okay, I want to talk to you, and then 2.5 months later, we're talking.
It was a little strange having my record come out that had been truly the most intense labor of love that I've experienced so far, musically, artistically, whatever you want to call it. But it was a little weird having that come out in the middle of the Snarky Puppy tour, as we were opening for Steely Dan. It was sort of like, okay, Zach's got a record, so what? By the way, we're playing with Steely Dan tonight.
Yeah.
Sort of. I'm sure that there was a lot of excitement that I didn't quite get out there. So I'm hoping that it can be a little bit of a slow burn, just kind of getting it out there to people. And I really appreciate you, talking to me about it, because I do want people to hear it.
Great. And we'll get it out to the world here. We'll get it started. Zach Brock, thank you for joining me today on Something Came from Baltimore.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Something came from Baltimore.
I hope you enjoyed the interview today with Zach Brock. The album is called Dirty Minds. It was released on the GroundUP Records, and it's out now. The show is over. Everyone, have a great day.